r/Nosleep. Posted by u/RisingMac. When I was a kid, the old lady down the street had a room full of old music boxes. If they played on their own when you walked into the room, they didn't like you. You're probably wondering what I mean when I say they didn't like you? I didn't really understand how it worked at first either, but then again I was only 7. She never told me where they came from or why they did what they did, but the old lady had always told us the music boxes were excellent judges of character. Here's the quick and easy lowdown on these boxes. If someone walked into the room and music started playing without any switches being turned on, for one reason or another, they didn't like you. Maybe you were just in general a bad person. Maybe you were a swindler, a cheater, a thief, or maybe even an animal abuser. Point is, if they played on their own, it wasn't a good thing for you. Of course, you may be wondering what happens if they start playing for someone. What if someone doesn't heed their warning and remains in the room? Well, I think most of you probably already know the answer to that. What exactly were these music boxes, you may ask? Honestly, as far as I could tell, they looked like any ordinary music device that you wind up or turn on. I called it a device since only a few were actually boxes. Almost all of them had a theme that had figurines or something or other to make music. One had a ballerina on her tiptoes that would move around like she was dancing. She played Once Upon a Dream from Sleeping Beauty. Another had a hobo that looked like he was winding up a gramophone that played When the Saints Go Marching In. There were 3 or 4 Christmas-themed boxes that played various Christmas songs, and there was the circus clown. He seemed to be the leader, as he was always the one who started playing first. He held balloons in his right hand and when turned on his head moved slowly from left to right like he was shaking it. No. He had pursed lips and his music even had a sound to it like he was supposed to be whistling. The old lady showed everyone that came to her house her music room. She kept a padlock on it whenever family stayed with her, which I remember sadly thinking wasn't very much. Now that I'm older and know the secret, I'm sure she had family members the boxes didn't like. Maybe that's why they never visited. Anyway, like I said, she showed everybody, especially door-to-door salesmen. Once I was grown, she always told me the boxes knew a scammer when they saw one and probably saved her from getting ripped off, especially as she got older. I was one of the only people she ever told the secret to. I was a little kid and I loved to listen to them. She always told me they loved playing their music for good people like me. Looking back on it, I didn't truly appreciate how amazingly crisp and beautiful their music sounded for as old as most of them looked. I kept coming over even into my teenage years to play them while I studied or something. It's probably why she trusted me with their secret. She never told me exactly what happened when they didn't like someone and that person didn't leave, but whatever they did, that person ceased to exist. No body or anything left behind. She told me only a handful of times the boxes actually took someone. Most were accidents before she put a padlock on the door, but the one time she actually fed someone to the music boxes was a home invasion. A guy broke in and punched her out and roughed her up. She told him the money was in the music room, so he dragged her in there and that was that. She said in a case like that where you couldn't get out of the room yourself, you had to close your eyes and not watch. The music boxes didn't want you to see them like that. If you didn't close your eyes, they might take you as well. I'm putting this memoir down for 2 reasons. Firstly, because the old lady passed away. I received a notice from her estate attorney that she had willed the whistle clown to me. I asked about the other boxes as well and was simply told those were accounted for in the will and they were going elsewhere. The second reason I'm telling the story of these music boxes is because I'm sure some of you are wondering if I ever used them to get rid of somebody. I sure did. Up until finding Nosleep, there hadn't been an adequate place to post this more or less confession since nobody would believe it. But the short of it is yes, I've used the boxes, just once, and I always thought that's why the old lady felt so close to me and maybe why she had left me the music box leader. It was the summer I turned 15. My dad had died when I was a baby and my mom eventually remarried a guy that turned out to be a complete loser. He was an abuser through and had his claws sunk deep into my mom. She was as typical an abused wife as it got. He won't do it again. It was my fault. He had a hard day at work. Same old horseshit. When I was 10, I promised myself when I was older and stronger, if he was still around, he was a dead man. I could have ambushed him with a baseball bat or something even as a kid, but I wanted to use my hands. I wanted to hit him over and over with a closed fist, just like he would. That plan went out the window when my mom was hospitalized and put on a vent. He got arrested, of course, but he posted bail and was out. This would end in the same way it always did. My mom would drop charges and move back in. The time was now. I just hoped the old lady wouldn't hate me. More importantly, I was afraid the boxes wouldn't like me anymore afterwards either. I waited a week since the old lady was going to be out of town. She had given me a key to her house a while back to water her plants whenever she was going to be out a couple days. I would lure dipshit to her house and see what happened. I had horrifying thoughts about what if they didn't start playing on their own for some reason. I had to remind myself that they would. If they played for someone trying to sell the old lady lightning rods for her roof, they'd certainly play for a wife beater. I took all the cash out of his wallet and cut his credit cards up with scissors. Once I heard him yelling and hollering. I lured him outside by throwing a huge rock at his windshield. He shouted out the usual horseshit about how I was gonna get it. I was unimpressed. I ran down the street to the old lady's house. I had already unlocked the door so I wouldn't get stuck fumbling about. "Hope you don't think the neighbor lady gonna save you," I heard him shout outside. I hid in the music room behind a dresser I pulled out. I heard him rushing into my delight. Whistle Clown started up right away. Cinderella Ballet Girl started up next, and within seconds everyone was playing their songs. I couldn't actually see any of the boxes from where I was, but I took the old lady's advice and kept my eyes shut. "I know you're in here, you little shit." I heard him take a few steps before he stopped. The music boxes sounded like they were getting progressively louder, but it might have just been my imagination. "Wah, what the hell?" I heard him say. The music played on. "Oh, fuck." I heard him begin retreating, but the door slammed itself shut. I was completely out of my mind with fright and adrenaline, so it might not be what actually happened, but I swear the music they were playing started sounding ugly. Like they were playing sour or incorrect notes, almost sinister even. "What the fuck? Open the door." I heard him pounding on it. "Open the fucking." I couldn't hear anything but the music, but something must have manifested itself. "No, no." I heard him scream. "I didn't mean it. I take it back. I'll never touch anybody egg." He was cut off. I heard him squeal in pain but heard nothing that sounded like a strike or attack, only the music that played on. "I won't do it again," he pushed out weakly. There was one more scream and a disgusting sound of gurgling like his jugular had been slashed, and then everything went quiet. I was afraid to move, but I didn't want to stick around in case they started playing for me on their own, since I was now essentially a murderer. I finally came to my senses and stood up. I rushed towards the door but stopped suddenly. The room was as clean as it had been before. There wasn't a drop of blood anywhere. More importantly, there was no body on the floor either. From what it sounded like, the room should have had a nice new coat of red paint, but I remembered what the old lady had said about what happened to people. No bodies were ever left. The cops bought my "I don't know where he went" story. I told them what I did about stealing his money and breaking his windshield, but all I said after that was I ran for it and lost him and don't know where he went after that, nor did I care. Luckily nobody had seen us go into the old lady's house, otherwise there probably would have been more questions. With literally no evidence at all, they had no choice but to file it as a missing person and go on about their day. The old lady knew though, right away. I cried as soon as I saw her after that and said I was sorry. She said she wasn't even mad. She said she understood. She told me she was a battered wife herself at one point. Her husband eventually left on his own and she didn't feed him to the room. Most importantly, she told me she'd never tell anyone. There was one thing that was on my mind for days that almost kept me up at night. The boxes had known somehow what my step-asshole's deal was. I remembered him saying he'd never touch anyone again and pleading that he was sorry. Who was he talking to? What did he see and how did they know? Still makes me shudder sometimes when I think about. I didn't go back into the music room for months. I was too afraid. I just couldn't help but think they would play for me on their own. The old lady said if they did, they did. I had done what I had to do. Eventually, despite the groan-inducing pun, I decided to face the music. If they played on their own, they did. I'd just leave like they wanted me to. I entered the room with the old lady watching and waited a second. Nothing played any music. After a few more seconds of nothing happening, I walked over to Whistle Clown. I flipped it on and he started whistling his gorgeous song. They still liked me. Almost 15 years went by before I set foot in the music room again. My mom moved to another town, and after I went to college I didn't have much reason to come back to my old hometown. I decided to make a special drive about 5 years ago when I found myself about 30 miles away. I knocked on her door and she remembered who I was despite having grown so much. I told her I had missed her and that since I was in the area I hoped I wasn't intruding stopping by. This was all true, of course, but I was mostly curious about how the music boxes would react to me now. I'd been through college where I had cheated on tests and did many other questionable things college students do. I had not been a model citizen for most of my 20s at least. I was afraid they'd start playing on their own as soon as I entered. The old lady said she had a hunch everything was going to be fine. We had some tea before I went into the room. She didn't follow me when I left the table. I was pretty nervous, so I stood outside the room for what felt like an hour. Eventually I went in and held my breath. Everything was silent. I turned them all on again and listened for what I considered to be the last time probably ever. It was as wonderful as it had been when I was a kid. I'm not sure why she chose me to receive the whistle clown or who else is receiving a music box or why she's splitting them up, but it's not my place to ask. I don't think I would want them all anyway. I wasn't even sure I wanted the one. Nonetheless, I was relieved that whistle clown didn't play for me when I took possession of him until I flipped the switch. I keep it in my home office on a shelf. I tell my family my door is locked because I'm a medical professional and there's sensitive patient data in there. I have a heavy-duty lock on it to be safe, though I realize the potential danger of keeping it around. I thought about getting rid of it many times, but it suddenly hit me recently that my daughter is coming up on dating age. You can bet your ass I'll be showing potential boyfriends my whistling clown. Like the old lady always said, her music boxes were excellent judges of character.